was reminded of the story of a passionate and tumultuous relationship. After last week's episode, I talk about letting go, and letting go has a lot of layers. Basically forgiveness, self, starting with ourselves and forgiving others, and just moving on. So letting go really is an abandonment of everything that doesn't work. Just a quick recap in case you didn't catch on to that last week, or you're joining us for the first time. Still congested. So this one relationship, it was more like a passive aggressive with the one side is completely aggressive. Someone has dominance over the other, basically, and so they got to some scuffles, some intellectual debates and some fights and many conflicts, and as much as they were one and the same, and they were very separate, and they were individual or unique in their own way. And rather than complement each other, like I said, one became a dominant party, and the other one was feeling, wait a minute, I have my own needs, and I have my own ideals, things that I want to do. I want to grow, and I want to be myself. And the dominant part is saying, you depend on me, so you don't have to like it. You're part of this already. It wasn't an equal partnership. That's what I'm saying. Somebody had to be in charge, and somebody had to be more dependent on the other to get things done, or to instill a sense of safety and security. And so this went on for a while, and then some acts of aggression came into play, where our passive aggressive side of the relationship was now feeling more and more compelled to do something for a change. And some of the actions were, can be sometimes complaining. The complaints were launched, and the complaints sometimes did reach the ears of, what we could consider to be the offending party. And the offending party is still holding all the cards, holds money, holds resources, and the non-strong party side of a relationship is basically a recipient of a lot of these benefits. And that's where the safety and security idea came from. But suddenly, how the relationship continued to develop, the only growth was really coming from the resources that came from the dominant party, and not from the receiving party. So the passive aggressive is not liking it very much, and keeps relating these issues to the dominant party. Dominant party says, I'm dominant for a reason. I have reasons for demanding more of you and giving you less. I mean, you already get plenty because you get safety and security. Yeah, you don't have to produce a whole lot. You're part of a this is a partnership, but yes, somebody holds all the cards, and you only are allowed to use the cards that I give you. And I'll leave it at that. So many times these ideas came to blows violently, and some, to an extent, threatened to completely derail the relationship. I mean, that's not much of a relationship. Once you realize that we really want to repair what we have and make it better, but there's two ways of thinking about this. We really want to be part of the partnership. We don't really want to be on our own. And in this relationship, there's no reward in parting ways. We've already grown accustomed to, the proverbial status quo. I mean, someone has all of the power, and we're the recipients of this power. The power brings some benefit, but the price to not try to do things around and continue to receive benefits is we just don't want to work for it. We would have to completely sever that relationship. And so after having certain actions, where we're bucking heads and we're doing our best to try and salvage what we have, a lot of thinking, deep thinking, we suddenly decide that what the things have happened where there's an abuse in the relationship, and there's kind of the feeling that we're second or third class citizen. You would think that we're not really worthy of anything beyond just getting freebies or just tit for tat. You what you get is what you get, and you should be happy with it. And from violence comes the realization that perhaps there is something more out there that's waiting for us to explore. And after some more thinking and some debating and soul searching per se, there was a breakup. The breakup was not nice, contentious, more violent. There's retribution from both parties. And at this point, sometimes we're probably stopping and thinking, I really don't want to part ways. I just want to make it more equal. You have all the power, but I want some of that power to come my way, like where it's 50-50. Then we want to stay with you. And that's not happening. The one more dominant power is just not about to let go. And seems to be that each party believes that the other is not backing down anyway, where there could be some sort of a resolution where there's no bloodshed involved, and at which point it is necessary. So the dissatisfaction that I've talked about before comes into play here, and you don't have to live with what you don't like. I mean, you can follow the conditions, you can kind of go by those conditions, but you don't have to live by them. If you want to wrest control from someone else, then you have to be able to take a chance on yourself. And so, fast forward, much conflict involved, and the breakup happens. And then more fights ensue because anyone who's ever held power of anything or anybody does not want to let it go. There's no such thing as negotiating power. Power is something somebody has to take it from you, and then they assume the position of dominance, and then they have to maintain it. So it's either they terrorize you into remaining in that relationship. They force you to follow only certain rules, and this is only the way it works, and you don't get to have your voice heard per se, and anything that you offer it's more of a benefits the other party, and it as painful as it sounds. And I've heard this said, and it's a very good saying. It's very simple, but it's pretty succinct. Sometimes the breakup is the blessing. And so we never know when something gets transformed, it is changed in some way. What comes of it is really what we should be pursuing. And so tonight, I want to talk to you briefly about yet another one of my 10 transformative lessons. And this is a special time, and it was not really planned, as this relationship and this breakup is the greatest breakup story of all time, pretty much. One that ended up in a relatively successful renaissance. Something was born of it that was better than the original. So just like splitting cells, it becomes, a being, it becomes something specific. There's programming involved in it, and this one had a very unusual programming, and that it was a big risk. It was the big letting go of everything that we knew, and we walked straight into the unknown. Whatever it is that is now that we're dissatisfied with, and whatever it is now that we discover we have that's scary and uncertain, has to be better than what we had before. Not to say that there will not be conflict, not to say that there will not be ever any form of resistance along the way. And even after you achieve something, there's always going to be patches of resistance, because you cannot simply help the course of events, what goes on around you, outside of you, and outside of your mind and outside of your body. You cannot control, but how you respond to it and how you navigate through these challenging episodes is what makes the life quality go up. This is where a sense of joy comes from. So just to name a very short list of people, and I'm not going to name them personally, and you can look them up. The number 56 is very important today. And today is Independence Day. If you're not American and you're listening, thank you for joining me. This is In the Pursuit of Joy podcast. And most notable of the American Revolution was the fact that the breakup really was never the intention. It wasn't even the outcome desired. It was more people just wanted to improve what they had, but they were okay with the status quo. Like I said, they were okay with having a sense of dependency, because that's where safety and security come from. Basically fear. If we split, well, there will be serious consequences, and I'll talk about just a moment. So the consequences will be severe. Severe meaning that if you embrace risk, and this is tonight's transformative lesson of our 10 transformative lessons, is risk. Talked about fear before, letting go of fear, but you don't understand the fear until you come out of that shell and embrace the fact that if you don't step out, if you don't risk, if you don't gamble on something, your deepest desires are never going to come to reality. And not by accident, but then not by on purpose. With the American Revolution, I'm not going to go on and on, because it would be a very long show, because I happen to enjoy history and talking about it. But the fact about the relationship between nations and people and cultures, it can be so strained, because on the one hand, yes, a lot of it was over taxation. There are a lot of other things in between, but I'm going to make it very simple, because over taxation, but taxation was necessary, because you can't run wars without money. And so if you spend money on colonies, and the colonies, you got to bring food to them and make them dependent, basically, on our resources, then you got to get some money back so you can feed wars and other places, because, Great Britain obviously was engaging in war, had other global wars that they were fighting, and being a colony of the British Empire was generating cash. But then the people who are generating are thinking, well, we would like to generate cash on our own here locally, rather than just pay more for stuff that you send to us. It comes a long way. It takes a long way to get on a ship. It's not like today. You can just UPS. I had a package delivered today, and it's a holiday, and I knock on the door. There it is. I can go on the internet. I can order whatever I want, and I can get instant gratification. But in the 19th century, even before, you have to put yourself there, not to judge, because we cannot relive that. We can look at it to learn from, and to maybe inspire in some instances, but that's already lived, and that's why we're here today, because somebody else had to go through that. But those somebodies had to specifically step out of the box and step outside of their minds and just go from the dreaming part to the action part. I haven't addressed the action yet on these lessons, but the risk, embracing risk, making yourselves risk tolerant is important, because people before the modern era, people are always embracing risk. People thought, hey, I may not live through this, but my children will, and this will make the future better. So these are big sacrifices. These are just they're almost incomprehensible unless you do it. But for your own lives, I'd like you to place yourself in the position of someone or a group of people who know they're going to pay a real big price. They don't know how disaster is going to come down to, if someone's going to wield that axe. They know what they're doing is considered treasonous. They know that what they're doing is severing a relationship in the worst way. There's no way of discussing this. At this point, it cannot be repaired unless a lot of people die, and then everybody else will be trapped into that whole mindset of, we can never get out of this, ever. And it's not going to get better. And so I understand myself the rationale behind the taxation. You got Stamp Act, and then you got the Tea Party. And if you've read enough of history, you can catch on to this whole concept is that we don't want to be forced to take your stuff to make you money, but then can't generate anything locally, even though we have resources right here that we can generate and make ourselves not just wealthy, but profitable and grow an economy. So there are two different ways of thinking about this. But that was not a relationship that was going to last anyway. I'm sure something else would have been the catalyst from that separation. They're just not, people probably never even imagined in their wildest dreams this could ever happen, and then they were. And then after the revolution, you have to contend with the people who survived. The 56 men who signed off on the Declaration of Independence, you should look them up. I'm not going to name them tonight because I try to keep this podcast. I know I'm limiting myself. I talk about no limits, but it's just a matter of technology, and I want to keep my podcasts long enough to convey enough information, but not long enough right now to spend countless hours trying to edit and upload these large files. So I will transition into something longer pretty soon. But anyway, pardon me. So the 56 men who signed off on on their own deaths, basically, they did it on purpose. I mean, once you step into that cow patch, it's pretty stinky, and somebody has to do it. And a great sacrifice. Several were arrested by the British and executed. Flat out, they had to know that. Many were impoverished. They had their valuables, their homes, their families assaulted and arrested. They died penniless or died bankrupt. It's really horrible how many, what the outcomes were personally, personal sacrifices that these men took just to put it into writing, that this is what we're doing. I'm not even going to whole dynamics of everybody else following through on what was brought about during the American Revolution. But initially, nobody really, even George Washington had, he had reservations, I just wouldn't want my money back. There was some other stuff that I want to talk about because, like I said, I won't shut up about history. But everybody had their own interests. They were financial. A lot of them had to do with other societal issues, but whatever everybody's, each person's motivations were to break is because there was no other way to solve it, to keep the union, to keep the relationship going in a way that was beneficial to both. And it was a big challenge to someone who can an entity who can send hundreds of ships to your shores and just blow you up. It's pretty big, unless you're at the coast and you're watching British ships just pile up in the water, and you're seeing this and you're thinking, okay, big consequences. Do I go through it? Because at this point, tag, you're it. I want you to look at life in the same way. These transformational lessons, they may seem simple. Once you put them all together, actually when we finish the 10, I'm going to add a couple more things to this list. It's part of my 30 Days to Success book. Is coming out soon. If you've been sticking around with me, or if you're just joining us, if you could go back to the beginning and listen to some of these podcasts and try to catch up on them. I'm not saying all the lessons in the same order that I'd like you to practice it, because that's part of the book, and also it is part of a course that I offer. If you want to study with me directly, that's great. That's going to be up and running on teachable.com, hopefully later on this summer. Actually, hopefully before the end of summer. And these have actually transformed my life in ways I can explain. I did go into some detail explaining how I've walked away from always following the same things. Like I said, not ditching the things that didn't work for me, and simply embracing the things that do work. And then having the discipline to maintain that and always go to the same best practices. And I want to get you to that point where you can achieve anything. And with the sacrifices of 56 men, not counting the scores of people who died, even with each military victory, just the civilians, people who were sitting on a fence, they were not quite sure if they want to root for either side. Cannot imagine all the death and destruction that came with that. But there's also death and destruction of bad habits, and the bad habit really is a dependency. So the dependency, like I said, we depend on the things that we've practiced for a long time, thinking that they work. And this is, like I said last week, I've been doing it for this all my life, and this is, it's worked out well for me. Well, it hasn't worked out for you, because if you're showing even about this much, a little pinch of dissatisfaction or any kind of negative thinking or speech, you're not satisfied. You're not happy. That means it's not working for you. There's something. When we fix things in our lives, we make ourselves better. We have to address every part of our lives. It's not included in the 10 right now. That's going to be the bonus. How to address every part of your life and how to improve it. You have to do it across the board. It can't be just, I want to fix my diet problem and then I'm not going to exercise, or I'm going to exercise and then just eat junk. The two just don't seem to go hand in hand at all. And that's just as an example, and things that you can do. That's what you want to do. There's some things that won't happen for you unless you assume best practices, the things that really work to get you to where you want to go. So the sacrifices of 56 men does not really faze you today, because we're in the year 2022. It's almost unimaginable to sign your name to a piece of paper and say, I'm breaking up with you. You can do it by text today. You can go to social media, right? Isn't that what people do? They go to social media and they break up. They air out their grievances for the world to see. Well, the world was watching at this time in the 19th century. The whole world, they're hanging on by a thread. There's war breaking up in other parts of the world. Same thing's happening today. People still watching. We're watching the one individual who's let's see where it goes. That crazy scheme that they keep talking about. Something about freedom. Something about being able to express ourselves. And that's really one of the biggest purpose of living. It really is to exist. Is to express ourselves. And it's a powerful message today. So today is the 4th of July. And I was not going to talk about the risk factor, accepting risk, until next week. So I'm glad that today's the 4th, because it makes perfect sense. You have to risk it all. The people who get up in the morning and they take their kid to, I don't know, if you have a kid or ever had someone you need to help achieve something. They want to be a swimmer. I know all about getting up early in the morning and jumping into a cold pool, but the real good swimmers, the ones who compete and earn all the medals, they have to do that. Their parents have to take them to practice. So their parents, by on the same token, have to make a sacrifice. So this is kind of a team effort. If you're a kid, you can't drive a car and go out unless you're a teenager and that you borrow the car to go to a swim meet. And I'm using swimming because I'll get to that in a minute. I'm big on swimming. You have to get it because that's the goal. This is the goal. You will be a swimmer, so to do it, you have to be it. And by embracing risk, the fact of risk is that everything that you do has to be scary. And it really does, because growth doesn't come from a place of safety and security. And this is what we're looking for. We get comfortable, we make it to the next level, and then we kind of want to kind of level a little bit, like we table it, like we're not achieving anymore. I know way too many people who do that. I've done that a couple of times myself, where I didn't improve myself, and then I wonder why is it that I'm not getting ahead, because I'm no longer improving. I'm not growing. You achieve something, then you have to. It's not a greed. It is a hunger to become better, and that's the lesson with tonight's point, is that to embrace risk and whatever it takes to get to what you're looking for and where you want to go, involves having to step out of that comfort zone. And you've already dealt with fear, hopefully. And that fear is not about keeps you from acting. It's fear tells you, it's yourself telling yourself over and over, you cannot do something. Oh, that is too scary. So the risk comes right next to the point when you say, I'm afraid, I don't think that's for me, or I'm not good enough. Well, if you're not good enough, but you still want it, then you will have to find a way to improve yourself in a way that would lead you to achieving what you want. And I hope at some point in the next couple of weeks, my sinuses will clear up. I can't hear myself speaking. So tonight, I want you to think really hard and really be honest with yourselves about embracing risk. Risk is the next step into propelling you to the next step, of course. And each one is going to happen fast. Like it's not going to take you 10 weeks to do these 10 transformative lessons. They should take you about a week. Some of the first things I talked about, addressing fear, the dissatisfaction, and also having the awareness that there's a problem, that you're not moving up because there's something you're not doing, or there's something you're unwilling to do. And I'm recapping just a little bit on what I've said already. You have to address that. And the fear is you telling yourself over and over, you can't do it, or you cannot afford something. You want that house or that car, you dream about it, but what are you doing to get closer to that goal, to the thing you want? You want to attract that partner into your life. How do you do it? First, you have to take certain steps to make yourself better so that you become someone who it will be welcome to that person's life. Not going to go into relationships tonight, but I'm just saying these are examples of things that people want. And this is what you have to do. So risk is to, again, let go. You can go back and forth a little bit with these lessons. Risk is the act of letting go and then moving on to the thing, move yourself closer to your goal, the thing that scares you the most. So this week, try something new. I'm sure I said that before, but this is risky because if there's something that you've been kind of struggling with and you're not quite sure if you can do it, then just get rid of your judgment, first of all. You have to let go of that. Just do it for fun. If you're afraid to do something, but that's the one thing you want to do, then you try to get closer to achieving it. I'll give you an example quickly about my swimming. It's been maybe 3 years. And mind you, I served in the Navy, so I wasn't a great swimmer. I had a near drowning experience at age 10. That's actually a funny story. You have to be there, but maybe I'll tell it next time. Where, for all effects, I should have been afraid forever of going in the water, but I wasn't. I was just kind of afraid that I didn't see myself as a swimmer. And this is not tonight's lesson about seeing yourselves in certain light, but you have to be able to risk feeling foolish and looking foolish, and people kind of criticizing you, and it goes back and forth. It's kind of like a cycle where it goes from fear to the desire, and the desire it gets squashed by your mind telling you this is not what we're used to doing. This option A is, or not B is. This is the stuff that's going to keep you safe, and you telling it, I don't want safe, I want growth. And the only way I can grow is by moving in the direction of the things that I want to do. And so getting in the water, one night I was on duty, I was at my last job, and I was overseas, and I'm looking at the computer because, when you're on watch, you don't do anything, you wait for things to happen. So there's a lot of time that you spend online just wasting time, basically. And I'm looking at the computer, and something popped into my head, a crazy idea. I wanted to run a triathlon, but the idea was more like, I think it would be cool to run a triathlon, not a marathon. I used to be a runner, but I don't really like the idea of just running. But the running and the cycling, that I've done both, but I stopped myself for a split second, and I said, a voice in my head said, oh, wait a minute, you suck at swimming. Then another voice said, well, I'm just going to have to fix that. Not going to do it here because I didn't have a swimsuit, first of all, and I had not really reached that point of actually wanting to step into that role. I had to consider it, how I was going to do it. And it took me a while just to select a swimsuit. I had that onesie that looks like a speed suit, but it isn't. It's not a compression suit. It just covers the thighs, and I had concerns about, people see me and I'm going to look fat. Well, so what? It's still there. You get your butt in the water. And it was a constant fight to get in the water. Not because I didn't like the water. It's just that what I do in the water, I have no... I wouldn't say I didn't have the funds to get somebody to teach me to swim. I just really had to work with my mind, being able to get in sync with my body and tell it to do what I wanted it to do. So it took a lot of solo swimming attempts and getting in the water. And I paid a lot of money for a monthly membership. I don't pay that much. I think it's pretty safe to say that what I pay for my membership is reduced because I'm a founding member of the club, so I shouldn't complain. But normally club memberships can be pricey, but and they have 4 wonderful pools, and then how can I say this? I'm wasting my money. I'm only using my cardio machines, and I do the free weights, and I go into the steam room. I really enjoy the steam room, and they got these pools in here, and I don't want to take up. They have a basketball court, so I have yet to go in there. I don't play basketball. You never know. I might have to get started because it's something new. So swimming was the new thing. Even though I've been in the water before, I've trained in the water. I've had to do what sailors do, the jump in the water with full gear. Then you got to use your trousers as a flotation device. I've done all that stuff. I've been in the water in a flak jacket. Yes, I was pretty dated. Just to tell you, I've been around a while. We didn't have the Kevlar and whatever, so I had full gear and a weapon, and you go in the water, and in the water everything can be done because you don't feel you don't feel gravity, and then you try to get out of the water with full gear, soaking wet. That's pretty unpleasant. But think about it: is that sense of not being comfortable, that real uneasy feeling that okay, I'm doing something new, and it's kind of scary. I did not want to go in the water with gear. But then there are people who pay very little money to do just that, to go fight in wars. So we all have to make some sacrifices. We all have to work through fear. Yes, I did make it through my basic training with hardly any idea how to swim. Someone who was older than me stepped up to the plate, and she said, someone who was older, she came in at 35, like right at the very edge of her, as old as you can get into the Navy, and she just told me how buoyancy worked. So I was able to float on my back and tread water. And the one big thing I had to do was jump from the top of a diving tower and then tread water for 5 minutes, and I passed. I mean, it's the people you meet along the way. I was kind of scared because I didn't want to be flunked out of boot camp, and I wasn't. And I'm always grateful. I don't know what happened to her, where she went with a career, but she had been around longer. When you're 19 and a 35-year-old, I know if you're 35 and you're listening, you think, oh, that's not old. But when you're 19, 35 seems to be pretty ancient. But she had 35 years. She had so many years where she had already lived and had more experiences that I had not experienced yet. So to get just a little bit of her knowledge was enough to push me into risking losing what I had to go through to get what I wanted. I joined the military. I didn't want to go home, be kicked out and say, well, okay, you're a training failure. No, that was not going to happen to me. And it didn't. But I had to step out of that comfort zone. And the comfort zone was not going to get me to where I wanted to go. So, fast forward 20 some odd years, I'm still struggling with that's the one thing I never did get to do was learn to swim. And I advanced in rank and everything, and I never really, I always had to avoid going underwater. I went through the stages of being the toe wetter to the occasional splasher. I have names for people who don't want to go in the water. The splasher to the up to the knee diver, and yeah, absolutely. And then the knee up to the knee and splashing in the water, and then you got the floating ones. You have enough knowledge to float a little bit, but not too far. If you can touch the sand on your feet, then you're good. You always have to be touching the ground. Why do you need to touch the ground? So I'm going through all this, and then I'm still thinking, I think triathlon is pretty cool. So I have yet to sign up for a race. I think that's going to be in the works in the next year. So risking feeling foolish, is that so bad? I mean, when I went in the water the first time at the club, I had to get the pool noodle, and then I forced myself, just being aggravated by the fact that I don't look good in a swimsuit anymore, and people don't really care. People don't really care. When you're feeling uncomfortable about taking that risk, they're not the ones cheering you on, then I would totally discount what they think. They think you look fat, and they're thinking to themselves, not telling you to your face, you should continue on. So I did. In spite of my own prejudices against myself, I went ahead and jumped in the water, and I did it frequently enough where I got used to it. Then from the surface, I started to venture into, I don't want to use the stupid pool noodle anymore. It's really irritating me, so I would not use it. Any flotation devices too. I know how to float on my back. I could swim on my back, but that's not satisfying. I wanted to learn more. And so I advanced on my own. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I watched some of the great swimmers. I mean, I've admired them during every time there's an Olympic game. I like to watch the swimmers. So it was interesting, something that I never really wanted to do full-time or learn fully or learn well, is something that I was always watching other people do. So I'm picking up tips along the way, and this is how I got myself to swimming. And I had to breach some serious mental barriers to do that. Some people just hire someone to teach them how to swim. I learned it from videos and actually dreaming about swimming. Once I started to get the hang of it, I could think of nothing more than swimming. I mean, I was talking at work. I mean, I suppose I was boring the hell out of people at work. When I remember how I couldn't even get across half a lap, which is 25 yards for the pool that I swim in. And it seemed to be so far away. When you just out of breath and you only took like 10 strokes, and you think, oh my God, how am I going to make it across? How do I do this? And I'm sure I gasped for it many times. I'm pretty sure I exhausted myself silly. Sometimes I was coughing up some water. I drank a lot of water. I'm sure the lifeguards were like, I know someone in particular used to kind of laugh at me like, I thought I'm going to find you at the bottom of the pool. That was pretty screwed up. I avoid that person at all costs. I don't swim with that person's there. I don't need that kind of static going into my brain. The brain's a sponge. Remember, I've talked about this before. I'm a grown woman. I mean, I should be able to handle that kind of criticism, but it's not in someone's place to say that. But no, I can hold my breath on the water fairly well, and sometimes I prefer to be on the water because that's where it's most peaceful. But I'll go into that detail later on, at some point in the future. This is not about swimming, but this is about risk. I'm risking everything. I mean, I know that I got lifeguards there on duty, and I know they're observing me, and after a while, they're kind of like walking away. Like I noticed that behavior changed when I started to be more proficient at it. And then when I knew I was really getting into it was the day that I started to buy equipment. When I got my first set of fins, when I got paddles to work my upper body. The first time I used the club's equipment, I got angry at myself because I tried to use the upper body only. I used the buoy and put it between my legs, and that thing felt like it was trying to flip me over and drown me, and it was a terrible feeling, and I was really irritated by it. So I tossed it to the side and said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I have yet to do snorkel, so I can work with that. And there's a reason for the not using the snorkel right now. But I need to overcome that. So that's one of those risky things that I had to find a way where whatever my fears are, they're going to be assuaged. That I can do whatever it is that I want to do. I just have to find a way to hack that and go beyond that fear factor. And I will. But I bought all the other equipment, and I bought my own buoy, which I thought was scary because I kind of asked myself, I thought I said that I wasn't going to do, we used to pull buoy, but the buoy is great for developing a strong pull. If you swim, you know what I'm talking about. And I got massive shoulders and a back, and my pull is really, I'd hardly even do any propulsion with my legs. My legs need some more work, but unless I'm racing, my kicks are pretty economical, and it's all in the upper body. And I've got enough stamina to do it now. In the beginning, no, we don't. Nobody has stamina when they first start. I should have expected that. It just surprised me how out of breath I was, and the embarrassment and frustration that came with it, and the risk was worth embarking on, because I went from seeing myself as not being worthy of the sport to knowing so much about it where it became natural. During the time of the shutdown, I was considered essential personnel, so I had to work full time. But we had, long hours and rotating schedules, and I managed to prepare myself physically to swim, and I was getting better. But I was swimming more. I was doing workouts, and there was no pool. Everything was shut down. I couldn't swim, and I reverted to where everything that we do begins, in the mind. So I started watching more YouTube videos about swimming, and I just reinforced the things that I already knew. And the risky part was that I hadn't been in the water for several months until the club started to open up again. And the only place of the club that was actually wide open was the pool, because in the pool area, the indoor pool that is, they have a special system, I guess, where the water, the air is filtered, but it's purged outside the building. It doesn't get recycled like it is in the gyms. And so that's the only place where I had freedom. As soon as they opened the following summer, they reopened the pool. I was in the pool practically every day. Every day I was not at work. But it's the time of the mental preparation that I went through. And this is where the risk factor comes from. Do you have the fear to go back into it again when you have a separation from what you were doing? And, it's like riding a bicycle. It doesn't come natural to everybody. Just ponder that tonight, this week. Yes, I did get back in the pool after not being able to swim in the water. And guess what? The things that I was having trouble with, just by thinking about them and dreaming about them and watching videos, my mind took my body into the water, and it felt like I never left. And I was surprised. I agree. I shouldn't feel surprised because I could do it. But I want you to go through this experience where you just let go. We talk about letting go and let go of the fear, and just take that risk. Do that one thing this week that I want you to do. That's all I want you to do. Just take a risk this week. It's something you've been meaning to do. Do a little bit of it, if that's what breaks you out of that fear factor. And let's come back next week and talk about the next step. Once you rein it in, then you can start working from that place and never leave. And I want to leave you with that. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. And happy 4th of July, Independence Day in the United States. It's time to break away from what keeps us from being our best. So this is In the Pursuit of Joy podcast, and I bid you a good night.